All of a sudden, the lead surgeon straightened up and goes, "What the heck is that?"
And I noticed they wanted to dress up Miss Barbie, and she was going to marry Ken, and they were going to get married. I wasn't feeling that. My Barbie was a female version of Rambo. An old girl meant business.
We got ready to go. One guy grabbed me, threw me to the ground. The rest of the company bolted. The guy who grabbed me was the fastest one in the company, and I was pretty fast at the time.
The boss needed someone to recover the vehicle. When we got there, I saw the NGS on its side, and I began to see the extent of how you died.
Tom McCollum is a Fayetteville native born at Fort Bragg. He joined the Army to see the world, but by a twist of fate, ended up spending the bulk of his military and civilian careers at Bragg. Along the way, he's learned to negotiate complex relationships, both personal and professional. Tom McCollum.
Well, first off, I'd like to thank Bill. I also went to NC State, and finally I met someone who had a lower grade point average than me. I did graduate, but with 2.56, nothing stellar. My first assignment to Fort Bragg was in 1986, and I came to become the S1, or the adjutant, for the 1st Battalion, 504th Parachute Infantry Regiment. I was thrilled to death. After years and years of being a leg, I was actually able to finally jump out of perfectly good airplanes for a living and receive jump pay. It was great. I hated the job, though. I did not like being the S1 in charge of admin and in charge of personnel. I wanted something more. The best thing, though, was that position got me ready for the one position that I can always look back and say, this is what I wanted to be. This is the perfect job, and looking back, it was for me. And I became the company commander of Alpha Company 1504. I got in there, and it was everything I was really hoping it would be. I finally got to look and get involved with soldiers on a much closer basis. By far, the one thing I can always look back and say that I mostly enjoyed was that I could see a soldier come on in from AIT, Advanced Individual Training, and he'd be brand new. This is his first assignment at Fort Bragg. And then over the years, we got to watch him develop into a leader, someone who was in charge of other soldiers, someone who was in charge of a lot of equipment, and someone who was in charge of getting missions done. And they did it. And it was fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. I had a battalion commander, Robert Killebrew, and he was the type who sat me down and said, basically, go out and use your imagination, challenge your soldiers. And he was also the type that gave you enough rope that you could hang yourself. And many times he came up to me and loosened up the noose and took it away from my neck. I took that philosophy and I passed it on to the soldiers that I worked with, both the officers, NCOs, and the actual Joes. Let them come out and get involved with it. Let them use their imagination. And to do that, we had to make really challenging training, and it was fantastic. We got to use our imagination. One thing that we did was buddy team live fire. Now, in reality, looking back, I'd have been relieved on the spot for what we were doing because we were shooting outside of the safety zone. We were shooting at soldiers within a foot. Basically what it was, if you can imagine, there's a bunker with a hole, and inside of there is a target. One guy would shoot live ammunition at the bunker hole, and another guy would maneuver around to the side, come up, low crawl up to the bunker hole within a foot of the rounds going by. And I still remember hearing those cracks go by because I always demonstrated it to each platoon as they came through. You would take out the grenade and you would prep it, and you'd look over at your buddy and just give a nod, and they would shift fire momentarily off to the side. You take the grenade, you throw it in, you roll away, and boom, the firing went right back into the hole, and the explosion went off. Buddy came forward, you put in a support firing position, and you moved on and carried out your mission. The soldiers really loved it, or at least I think they did. The other things that we did, we always, besides airborne operations, which is always something that's going to be a challenge, especially when you're looking and you're about 1,500 feet over the ground and you're jumping out of a perfectly good airplane and you're praying to God that lowest bid parachute that someone made works, and it always did. One of the areas is we did morning PT, and we had this one challenge, and it took 3 times for him to realize we'd stop about a block and a half away from the company area. And I'd look over at him and saying, if you can beat me back, PT is done. But if I beat anyone back in the company, PT will continue and it'll just progressively get harder. The first time I'd run, they would run, I'd always beat them back. Second time, same thing. It was the third time someone finally realized what to do. We got ready to go. One guy grabbed me, threw me to the ground. The rest of the company bolted. The guy who grabbed me was the fastest one in the company. And I was pretty fast at the time. And then he'd see that the company was back in. He'd push me down even harder, and then boom, he took off. And then I'd get up and I'd trot in because I knew the challenge had been met, and they finally realized they worked as a unit to meet the challenge and meet the mission. There were a lot of other things that we did. Platoon live fires coming off of helicopters, dropping in mortars with them. All of that, I really enjoyed it. And again, I think they did too. The good thing was everyone came home. There was, I don't want to give you the impression that everybody in the company was hard charging. That was our goal. We didn't always make it. There was one guy, Cody White. Cody was the type that you never knew what was going to come out of his mouth. We all know someone who you can go on up and this person could sweet talk any woman in the bar, could go up and sell ice to an Eskimo in the middle of winter. That was a lot of people, but that was not Cody. Cody was the opposite. Cody, every time he opened his mouth, you broke into a cold sweat because you had absolutely no idea what was going to come out of there. Soon after I took company command, we were going to a formation, and the company commanders were out on Ardennes Street, and the battalion headquarters was about 50 feet away. Doors were all closed, windows were all closed, and we're standing there talking, and all of a sudden we hear a loud, thunderous voice from inside the building, just ripping someone apart. There was the sergeant major of the battalion, Roy Brown, and he was just tearing into someone, and we're all standing out there going like, who does he have? And so we all came up with various excuses to go into the battalion headquarters. We came on in, and I looked up, and here's the senior NCO in my company, my first sergeant, McCollum, Master Sergeant McCollum, coming on down the hallway, and I looked at him and said, "Top, what are you doing here?" He said, "It's White. He has White in there." And that's when I was like, White, I'm not quite sure which one. And he went on in. Well, what had ended up happening was Cody was in charge of head count at the mess hall that day, and this was back when the battalions had their own dining facilities. And the head count was basically he checked everyone who came on in to eat for breakfast and to make sure that they were a soldier assigned to the unit. So Cody's sitting there taking the head count, and at the time the division commander, Carl Steiner, comes walking through. He comes on up and he looks down and he signs in and he says, "So, soldier, how's the chow?" Cody looks at him and says, "Well, sir, to tell you the truth, it sucks." And General Steiner sort of leans back, and then he goes on in, grabs the chow. The battalion commander hears the word, "Hey, the CG's in your dining facility. You might want to go join them." So he goes on down, and it was Colonel Medlock at the time, Robert Medlock, and he comes in and he sits down with them, and they're talking, and then all of a sudden the conversation says, "You know, this chow is really good." And he says, "Well, thank you, sir." And he says, "Yeah, the guy at the head count said it sucked." Well, needless to say, that snowball started rolling down the hill and made its way to the command sergeant major, and White quickly made his way to the command sergeant major. That was my introduction to White. Later that afternoon, he's in my office, and I'm talking to him. I said, "What are you thinking?" He says, "I don't want to be here. I want out of the Army." And so there. But with White, he had just signed a year earlier a 3-year commitment. I looked at him and he said, "All right, you want out?" And he goes, "Yes, and I'm going to do everything that I can to get out." I looked at him and I thought, "No, you're not. You can go ahead and try it, but I'm not going to let you out. You made a commitment to the United States Army. You are a grown man. You will fulfill that commitment. I'm not going to allow you to start a path in your life where you think you can make a commitment and then all of a sudden you can break it just because you don't want it anymore." And he looked at me and says, I'm going to get out." And he says, "No, White, you're not going to get out. I'm not going to allow you to regret this." So I talked to the first sergeant. No platoon wanted White. All the 3 of the platoons in the mortar section all said, "No, don't want anything to do with him." So I looked at him and said, "Okay, let's make him my radio telephone operator." As a company commander, I had two. One would talk to the battalion commander, and then the other would talk within the unit. So usually it's the senior RTO who talks to the battalion commander. White, he just came on board, and I made him the junior. So he talked to the platoon leaders. I made a point to make sure that all the RTOs fully understood how we operated and what my train of thought was for all the missions, so that they could clearly convey across the radio to the platoon leaders and everyone else what we were doing. So we're moving along, and there's January. We jumped into Holland Drop Zone, which is on the far west end of Fort Bragg. January, if you've never done it, jumping out of a plane over Holland Drop Zone, it is ice cold. And we were in the plane, and I can remember internally thinking, and no one, this is the first time I've ever said it out loud, thinking, oh God, I hope there's high winds. Let there be high winds, so that the jump would be scratched, we would go back and land, we'd get in the trucks, and we could be warm for maybe another hour. But the green light always came on when the doors opened up, and we went out, and on the inside, turn it off, on the outside, great, let's go. And I'd always made a point to turn into the guy next to me saying, hey, have a good jump. We went on out, we hit the ground, we got our assault objective, and then we started moving, and we did a mission what's called movement to contact, where basically you know the bad guys are out there and you have to go find them. And we moved, we had the lead platoon up front, myself with my radio operators, the mortar section, and then two platoons in trail. We're moving along. The lead platoon, granted, we just jumped, it was an all-night operation, and now it's daylight. They were moving like they were on a Sunday stroll. And it was like, pick up the pace, get spread out. You know, and I kept going over with the platoon leader, pick it up, and we're moving slow, and no one's doing anything. Well, about this time, the battalion radio goes off, and I hear Colonel Killebrew on the side, you know, Alpha 6, this is Red Devil 6, over. And I sit there and I go across, and you know, say, Red Devil 6, this is Alpha 6. And he goes, Alpha 6, this is Red Devil 6, over. And that let me know that he wasn't hearing me. He had a short in his radio system that he swore up and down he didn't have it. Well, all the company commanders, we could talk to ourselves over that net. And so we all knew it's not our system, it's his. So having been in this situation before, I knew he was going to start to get angry. And we're moving really slow, things aren't going right. I talked to the platoon, telling them, move, move, move. And it's not really happening. And now the pressure's coming in from the battalion commander, you know, trying to reach me. And I know what's coming. So I looked at White and I said, you tell that effing platoon leader to get that GD platoon moving now. And about this time, I finally made contact with the battalion commander. And of course, he's ripping me apart. He's truing into me, and I hear White off to the side. Luck, you effing platoon leader. You better get your GD platoon going now. And about that time, I reached over, I let go of that handset, talking to the battalion commander mid-sentence, and grabbed the other handset. And I pulled it back from him and looked at him, and White looks at me and says, I only did what you told me to do. So then I had to get on the radio and talk the platoon leader down. And then you say, okay, you know, we do need to pick up the pace. We're the lead company for the battalion. Let's get moving. Eventually we did. We made contact with the enemy. Everything went on. Meanwhile, the battalion commander did chew me apart. And that was my field introduction to Cody White. I still wasn't about to let him out of the Army. You know, I just thought, okay, we're going to apply a little bit more pressure. Well, eventually, Walter Story, who was my my senior radio operator, he moved on to a platoon, and so Cody moved up to become the senior radio operator, and a new guy came on in, took Cody's place. We are doing what's called, we are doing an operation going into a city, the built-up city area training facility on Bragg, which is, military term is MOUT operations, military operations in an urban terrain. One of the things that you have to do is you've got to gain a foothold and then exploit. Gain a foothold, you concentrate your fire on a small section. When you break the enemy in that area, you flood in quickly with as much firepower as you can. So we're standing there and we're starting to get ready to make contact, and I told the radio operator, the new guy, tell second platoon to concentrate their fire on the second story of the corner building. Then tell first platoon to go. Take the bottom story. Got it. You know, and he repeated it back to me. Well, that's not what he relayed. He told second platoon, concentrate fire on the building, first platoon, attack. So if you think about it, first platoon was moving straight into the firing of second platoon because they had never shifted their fire up or off to the side. Looking off to the side, I looked like, oh God, what the hay is going on? And Found out, he told me what he said. He understood that he made a big mistake, and White turned and grabbed him and said, "You have got to understand what he says. You have got to repeat everything he says to those units, because lives depend on what you say to them and the operation." And I looked at him, and I remember looking at White and saying, just thinking to myself, "You understand, you've got it, finally." And so there, but not word for word, please. So then later, another operation, we were out there, and I decided, let's take all the officers and NCOs, and we're going to step out of our positions, and we're going to give all the enlisted soldiers the jobs. I had White become the company commander. The platoon leaders and platoon sergeants, squad leaders all stepped off to the side, and someone in the units took over for the operation. We already planned the operation. Everyone knew what they had to do. White excelled. He did everything exactly. He had the units attack where they were supposed to, shift fire when they were supposed to, bring in support. It went off very, very smoothly. He excelled. He did a great job. Few years later, it was time for me to change command. And I really hated going. I loved that company. It was a great bunch of guys. But it was time for me to go. That's just the way the Army is. And I changed command, and I went over to the Special Forces qualification course, and after I passed that, I went somewhere and I ran into the company commander who took my place. And I talked to him and saying, "How's the company doing?" And he said, "Well, it took me a while, but the company's where I want it to be." And I looked and said, "By the way, what about Cody White? Where's he at?" He goes, "Oh, I kicked him out. That guy was a problem child. It's in there. I gave him dishonorable discharge. He is out of the Army." I wasn't surprised, but I was severely disappointed. White got what he wanted, but I always thought it was the wrong thing for him. A few years ago, on Facebook, one of my soldiers got in contact with me, and he said, "Hey, Cody's sister's trying to find people who served with him to get stories." So I contacted her, and it ended up that her son really idolized Cody, really thought the world of him. But Cody had died a few years earlier of cancer. So I talked to her and relayed some of the stories. I cleaned some stuff up. I wanted to make sure that Cody was a hero to his nephew. And then we got to talking some more, and she said, Cody always regretted being kicked out. He was something that he knew was not the best for him. And right after 9/11, he tried to re-enter, but because they had a dishonorable discharge, they weren't about to let him back in. Looking back there, as I said, that was my best assignment in the Army. And by far, the thing I liked about it the most was I was able to be involved with the soldiers in the development of them. But not only did they was I able to develop them, but they also helped develop me. And along with my parents and my brothers and sisters, the teachers, my friends, my wife, and my stepdaughter, they helped make me who I am. But by far, all the soldiers I ever served with, and especially those in the 82nd, they made me who I am. They taught me a lot of personal interests and personal shortages of my life and things I needed to change to become a better person. And though they did, the one by far who developed me the most was Cody. Cody taught me patience, taught me what I think leadership. He taught me how to deal with people with a very diverse background and how to guide somebody. And I'll always be not only grateful and thankful to the soldiers I served with, but I definitely will always be thankful for having Cody White in my life. Thank you very much.